Hello. This is another Ruby live stream. My name is Jesus Castillo from rubyguides.com. And it seems like I have some connection issues. So if the stream just stops or it freezes or something, well, there is that. There are having some connection issues. I don't know why. But still, I'm going to try and speak with you and show you some things here so we can have some fun with Ruby. Hello, have a chat message from Alice the Punk. Hello with many exclamation marks. Hi, how are you? So today I was thinking, again, these are live streams and my live streams are not pre-planned. I have start with a general idea, but then wherever we go, it depends on the chat, on the viewers, and what you say on the chat, questions that you ask, and also things that I come up with, ideas that I come up with as we are making progress here. So to start here, I was thinking APIs are pretty important, right? In programming, you probably heard of APIs, but what the heck is an API, right? Well, API stands for, it's like an acronym thing, right? So it has a meaning. API means application programming interface. Application programming interface. Okay, so like this. Application programming interface. Okay, so what's an application programming interface? We are still kind of the same, that just knowing these letters. Well, we have some information. We know it has something to do with some kind of application, has something to do with programming, and it has something to do with some kind of interface. So the most important word of these three, probably if you have to understand what an API is the word interface. So what is an interface? An interface like a way to talk with to interface, right? To communicate. It's a communication device. That's what it is. An interface, a way to communicate with what? With another application. How? With programming. Okay, so that's the meaning of application programming interface, of API that you hear about so much. It's an interface, meaning a communication device, a way to communicate, to request things, to send things, to submit information, and to request information. From where are we requesting this information, or where we are sending this information? From an application. Application is another word for a program, for a computer program. That's what an application is. And how we do that? With programming. In our case right here, with Ruby programming. So I hope that's the best definition I can give you right now for what an API is. And the next thing we can look at is examples of APIs. What are APIs used for? Well, they are used to interface, usually to offer information to other developers. So you have an application. In your application, you have data, right? You have kinds of data. You have users. Users might create posts, or maybe you have a weather station device connected to your server, something like that. The weather station is going to produce this for another thing. The weather station is going to produce data, right? You might want to share that data from the weather station with other people, and one way to do that is with an API. Another thing is like in events or statistics, like if there is a survey or survey results, or of these kinds of data that you might want to have access to, or Google Maps, or whatever data someone has that might be helpful, then you can access if they offer it. If they offer an API, that's how you access it. Through this API that they offer, you can access the data that they want to share. Or YouTube, for example, you're watching YouTube right now. So YouTube has an API, and with YouTube's API, you can find, okay, this video has this title and has this length, has all of this information. So that's what an API is. But it's not only request information, you can also, there are also APIs that allow you to do things as if you were an actual user of the application, as if you were interacting or interfacing with the application with your browser. You can do that with a program, what we say programmatically, which means automatically through code, right? Programmatically is quite the word. But what it means is through code, automatically we're doing something that you would do manually by hand, by clicking on things, by typing, by clicking on buttons and links, by typing with your keyboard, right? We can do these things automatically through an API. What kind of things? Where for the YouTube example, that will be, for example, change the title of a video. That could be an API action that you can take through the YouTube's API. Change the title of a given video, if of course you own that video. Then you can change the title. So that's what an API is, and to really understand this, we have to work with an API and see it working. So you can find a list of APIs. If you Google or you search for free APIs or list of APIs, something like that, you will get a list that looks like this. And usually they are in these categories. As you can see here, open source projects, open data, news, music, machine learning, health, right? All of these are sites, websites, applications that have useful data to offer to other people. And you can access that data. So there is a lot of data, of course. What you can do is come to one of these lists and just pick one. Pick one that you find interesting or whatever. Pick one of these APIs and then see how it works. So how does it work? It has documentation. So for example, I picked NASA for us here. NASA has multiple APIs, because NASA produces a lot of data, right? With their exploration of space and all of that, they are producing lots of data every day, and they want to share that data. And when they share it, it's using APIs. Okay, so we have some comments on the chat. Hi from Animatrix. Hello, how are you? Hi from Bangladesh. Hey, I am from Spain. We have Chemima Chepiego from Kenya. Hello. Thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying this and learning something. By the way, if you're new here, my name is Jesus. I'm from Spain, and I have a website called rubyguides.com where you will find a lot of Ruby tutorials and guides to help you become a professional Ruby developer. So that's rubyguides.com. So back to our NASA APIs, we can come here. You can get an API key. What's an API key? Well, this is basically one way to, it's like a kind of password that allows you to access this data. So we just explained that with an API like this, API, yeah, pronunciation, whatever. With an API, you can access this data. But because this data is useful, a lot of people want to access it. So to control the access to the data, there are different ways to do this, and the easiest way is to use an API key, which is basically like a password for the API. Through the API key, they can know how many requests you have made, and they can limit the request for the data, so you don't overload the server or something like that, right? So that's what an API key is. And here, to get your API key, you just fill this form, and NASA will send you your free API key. You don't have to pay for this. There are some paid APIs, but most APIs are free. So in here, you can get your free NASA API key. And here it says what are the limits. I just mentioned that API keys are used to control access to the data, to the API. And here it explains the limits. So you get up to 1,000 requests per hour, which is not bad at all. It's pretty good. And there is also a demo key, which we're going to use in this session. The demo key has much lower rates, as you can see. Has 30 requests per IP address, and up to a daily limit of 50 requests. So that's a much lower limit. But if you want a much better limit, it's very easy. Just get your API key. And you can even see how many requests you have used through this HTTP header. Okay. Now you will see, if you scroll down, these are all of the data that NASA is sharing in the form of APIs. There is all of this. So the easiest to use from this, the first one is called Astronomy Picture of the Day. Astronomy Picture of the Day. And it's very easy to use. As you can see, most APIs, if not all, they will give you documentation. So that's like the instructions, the manual of how you work, how you interface, how you interact with the API, right? We call these endpoints, right? The endpoint is like the URL that you have to access to get the information that you want. In this case, this is the URL. Now, if you can open this URL, you don't have to open. Okay, here's what I want to say. You can open this from your browser to see what it looks like. Okay, so let's do that. And you see, we get this API key missing. An API key was supplied, right? So we need the API key, so we're going to use the API key demo key, which we can see here. There it goes. Now, usually this looks like this, but Firefox, in this case I'm using Firefox, so it does something interesting, which is, Firefox does something interesting, which is it has this format. It formats the information that you get from the API. But if you really want to understand what the data actually looks like, then you click on raw data, because this is what you're going to work with. This is what you're going to work with when you come to Ruby and you want to work with this data. This is what it looks like. Now, this not, it looks like a hash because it has these squiggly brackets, but it's not actually a hash. It's not a Ruby hash, at least. It's not a valid hash in Ruby. You take this in Ruby. In Ruby, we don't use the colon like this. We use the hash rocket, right? So if I come here, if I try that, I'm probably going to get an error, right? Let's try this. There it goes, we get an error. Why? Because that's not how we do hashes in Ruby. It looks like this, and this is called, do you know what this is called, this symbol? At least what we call it in Ruby. We call this very fancy name hash rocket, the hash rocket symbol. So that's what we call that. If you didn't know that, now you know something new. Hash rocket symbol. Now there is another way you have seen before, which you might confuse with this, which is this one. Now this works, but this is different. Why does this work, but this doesn't? Well, because a very important thing. This is a string. Okay? This is a string. And this, what's that? What's that? That's a symbol. So that makes this very different. With a string or anything else that's not a symbol, you have to use the hash rocket symbol, like this. But for this, you have to you can use it like that because there is it's like a special case, right? It's a special case that you can do when you use this, which we call the key. So this key and value. The key, if it's a symbol, then it can be used like this. But what's given to you by NASA in this example is not a symbol, it's a strings. So this is not valid in Ruby. We have to do something to convert it, to transform it into a valid Ruby object. And that's what we're going to see now in a moment. But okay, so let me look at chat, and we have Marco Tuso, big fan in here. Hey Marco, I hope you're doing good. Thanks for your support and thanks for watching. Okay, so we have that. So how do we have to do two things here. Two things, notice this. Two things. Thing number one, we have to get data. Somehow we have to get this data from the URL into our Ruby code. Somehow we have to do that. Okay, and this thing number two that we need to do, what is it? Well, we have to transform this data into a format that we can work with, and we call that parsing. Parsing. And what kind of format is this? What's the name of this format? We have it right here. So Firefox is already giving you the answer. This format is called, very important to be familiar with this name, because if you are a web developer, you're going to see this name a lot. This is called JSON. So this right here is JSON. So what is JSON? Well, it's data in this format. But JSON is also an acronym. There's a lot of acronyms in programming and tech and technology world. And a lot of words, of course. Parsing JSON. JSON actually means something, which is JavaScript So that's the G and the S. That's JavaScript, right? And then what does on mean? On. What does this mean? Well, object. The O is for object, and the N is for notation. So that's JSON. It means JavaScript, object, notation. JSON. And what is JSON? Well, it means that it looks like that. It's raw data. So that's what you're going to get. When we get the data, we're going to get JSON, and then we need to parse JSON with the purpose, with the goal of making it into something we can work with. So it looks more like this for us, right? We have the individual data. Okay, so let me go back. JSON. So we have Aleph the punk on the chat. I read the chat on another screen. He just had a comment saying JSON. Kind of funny. Okay, so we have that. So quick overview of what we're doing if you join here. I'm talking about APIs. You can either create your own API to share data with others, or you can use an API to use that data that others are sharing. Okay, where do you find APIs? Where you can search them. There are lists like this one. There are lists of APIs that you can use. So use search for list of APIs and you will find a list like this one. And then for this example, I'm using NASA's API. And we have this example query. And this, as a result of that query, we get this information. And this information is in the JSON format. With that review done, let's go into with that done, let's go into point number 1. How do you get data from an URL like this one? How do we request this data? Well, we need something called an HTTP client. More acronyms for you, more words. So what's HTTP? Basically, the only thing you need to know for now is that HTTP, you see HTTPS in here. Well, HTTP is how websites work, how websites communicate between the browser and the server. It's like a language, right? So we need one of these clients. It means that a program that can communicate with the server. That's all this is, a program that can communicate, talk with the server. In Ruby, we have many of them in the form of gems. There's also one built-in HTTP client, which is called, I'm going to show it for you, net HTTP. Now, most people don't use this, although it's built in. Why? Because it's harder to use. The methods and the way it's done is harder to use than others. It has, I believe, less options, less features. So most people use a gem. Like, for example, one called Faraday. Like that. Require Faraday. That we add the gem into our Pry session. By the way, if you're not familiar with Pry, I explain Pry in my Ruby book, Ruby Deep Dive, which you can find at rubyguides.com, which is my website, rubyguides.com. And I also explain this require. If you want to understand what require is doing, I also explain this in my book, which I think is useful to know in case if you run into problems or things like that. Okay, so we have Faraday, and we can use it, Faraday. There it goes. Okay, how do we use it? We can use the get method. So get is going to, if we go back to the documentation for NASA, what does it say here? Get. You see that? Get. Well, we want to get. What are we getting? We're getting the information. We're getting information given by this URL. Okay? So let's give that a try. I'm going to get the URL right here. Whoop. Yeah, this. We're going to get this URL. I wanted to copy it, but whatever. I think we have it. There it is. We have the URL right there. And now what I get is the response object. Response object. So this response object, it has the data, everything that's in here. It has this. It also has extra information that's called meta information. So information about the content. That's some details of what happened with the request, right? So let me save this into a variable. This response. There we go. And now from the response, what we can do? Well, it's an object of this class, and classes have methods. Methods do things. So if you have to understand one thing about Ruby, for Ruby to make sense, complete sense, is that it's all about object-oriented programming. So that means we have objects. Objects are made from classes, and classes have methods. Okay, let me say that again. To really understand Ruby, the structure of how Ruby works and how it's made, is you need to understand object-oriented programming. The basis of object-oriented programming is objects, right? Objects are made from classes. Classes have methods. This is a class. And methods do things. They are like commands that you give to the objects. So I hope that's clear enough. And I say that because this response object, it has methods. Like, for example, the body method. So if you use the body method, what do we see? Ta-da! This is this. Isn't it? I can print it so you can more clearly see it. Because right here, we have these backquotes. Right here, this backslash. But if you actually print it, you can see it like it actually is in here. So now we have that, which means we have point 1 done, the first step. So whenever you're doing some program, you want to divide it into steps, like cooking, like you're cooking an omelette or whatever, or cake. So you need steps. You can't just throw everything to the oven and get your cake. You need to do things step by step. Or same thing with programming. To anything, this could be a Rails feature that you are implementing or any kind of program that you want to build. You have to break it down into steps. And to break it down into steps, first you need to understand what the program looks like or the feature looks like when it's done. And how do you get there? What are the smaller steps that need to be done to get there? And that's how I ended with this list of two steps, right? We need to get the data, and then we need to parse the data. So we done this, and now we can build on top of this. You can build on top of this result, this data, and then we can parse this. And this very easy, because in Ruby we have the access to. You remember what this format is called? What's the format of this? It has a name. It's called JSON, right? So there is something called, oh, that's from another video. We can something called the JSON library in Ruby, and you can, it is built into Ruby, but you have to require it. And now that makes it very interesting, because we can do JSON.parse, and what are we parsing? The response body. And ta-da! There we go. Now we have an actual Ruby hash that we can very easily work with. Now, as you can see, this is an actual Ruby hash. And we can do things like, okay, now I want, let's say that I want the URL. So this is the URL for some kind of image. Or I want the date. Well, if you know how a hash works, you can get it. There we go. And that's not working because that's interesting. Let's see it. Let's call this how about info dot keys. There are keys. Oh, it's not working because I was trying to use a symbol key, and we have string keys, right? There is an option for JSON where you can get symbol keys. I don't remember, it's like symbolized true or something like that. Fact, I think we can get that information. Show doc. No. How about let's see, source options, symbolize. Yeah, there you go. Show doc. Ah, there it is too. Symbolize names. Interesting, this. Okay, symbolize. So you could get, in theory, that symbolize true, and I don't think that works. Symbolize this. Let me symbolize names. Symbolize names. Okay. Ah, there we go. I guess I had a typo in the word symbolize or something. But as you can see, now these are symbols. So if there are symbols, we can access the date like that. And if you don't have this option, which is the default, then you can access the date like this. Okay? So there it is. And that's how we access. Now this point 2. This is the parsing, which means we transform the data to extract meaning from it. And in this case, the meaning is this hash. And now you can use this information however way you want. You could have a page where you show this image, and then below the image there is the title, or above the image. So we have some chat messages, which I'm looking at another window. It says, Steven loves Sam, you're an awesome man. Oh, thank you. And we have Marco Tuzzo says, please make talk about Rails Webpack with Vue, React, or another. I want to invite you to my podcast if you want to come say hi. What's your podcast about? And what's the name of your podcast? And I don't use Vue or React, so that's a thing. And I don't like Webpack, so there is that. So yeah, that's how you take an API like this one and use it. Of course, there are other APIs here you can play with. For example, these asteroids. Here is the URL. Another URL, simple query. We have here space weather. So if you want to know what the weather is like in space, I guess you can use this API. So you will, if you are building some kind, so this is good for practice, but it can also be used to build some kind of application. But I recommend just play with these APIs just for practice, just to see what it's like to work with an API. Because if you work as a professional Ruby developer, you're going to be using APIs, and you're also going to be creating APIs. So it's really useful to understand how they work. Okay? So are there any questions about this or Ruby or anything that you want to chat about? Let me know in the YouTube live stream chat. And while I wait for questions, let me mention that I have the website rubyguides.com. That's my website. And in there you can find my newsletter, and you can also find my Ruby book. If you get my Ruby book, it will help you prove your Ruby skills. I also help support my work that I'm doing here with all of these videos, all of the content that's on my website. There's lots of content that available for everybody. I put a lot of work into this, so it helps if you get the book, and also it helps you learn. So any questions about APIs or doing here? I'll be happy to answer these questions for you. Just quick review what I have done here. I've used JSON parse to actually take the data from the API and make it usable for us as a hash. And then before that, I use something called Faraday. And Faraday is a gem that you use to request data from a website. And there are others. There is the built-in net HTTP. There's another called HTTP party. Yes. And there's another called http.rb. Right? Like this. http.rb is HTTP party. There is Faraday, which we use here. There is XCon. there is more. Yeah, there is a lot of this what we call HTTP clients. And just pick one unless you need a very specific feature which one has and the others don't. Just go with one. When you need to do this kind of things. Now, there is another thing I didn't mention is that some APIs, they offer their own official libraries to access them. So for us as Ruby developers, that will be Ruby gems. So maybe there is a NASA Ruby gem to access their API. And what that will do for you is that it will be a little easier to request and parse the data if there is such a gem. I know there is this gem for GitHub. There is a gem for Twitter, of course. I think there is also a gem for YouTube to access the API through the gem. That's typically called an API wrapper. But you don't need it unless it's a very complicated API. You can do what I show in this video. You get your information and then you parse it. And then you're done. You just need to use the data, like if it was a regular Ruby hash. And from here you can aggregate the data. You can use Sinatra, for example. You can use Sinatra to build a very simple application where you show this data. You can save this data into files, into actual files, or into database. There are many things you can do. If you here's where you use your imagination, right? What you do with this data. You can combine it, you can change it, you can analyze it, you can do very different kinds of things. So use your imagination, what you do with the data once you have it. But I will start, just build a simple application, Rails, Sinatra, Hanami, whatever, Roda, whatever you want to use, and build a very simple application. It doesn't even have to be a web application. You could make a command line application. I have a video how to do that if you don't know how. Okay. So any questions about that, or any questions about APIs, Ruby, Ruby guides, anything that you would like to know before we end this live stream session? Just waiting for questions right now. We already finished the main part of the content. You have questions, I might be able to help you with that right now. Otherwise you might have to email me. I might not see your email. I might have too many emails or whatever, and then I can get to your question. Oh, we have something. Ninja Turtle. Can you show how to add headers to the request, please? Thanks. What kind of headers would you like to add? Because you can access the headers. Oh, to the request. Right. Yes, that depends on your HTTP client. So for the response, of course, you can get the headers. For the request, which is what you're sending, that's going to depend on what gem or what method you're using. So Faraday, so you will have to check the documentation, has get, and we'll have to check, let's see, show doc Faraday get. Let's see if we can get some documentation for Faraday. I don't think I installed the documentation for Faraday, but we can come here. Maybe. Hold on. Faraday. Where is documentation? Methods, get. So there you go, headers. So you can do this, you can do get. So you can do connection object. So you will need a connection object to do this apparently. So you need a connection object. So Faraday connection new. That gives you a connection, and then you can call get with a block, and inside this block you get a request object which allows you to specify headers right there. I think there is other ways, but this mostly check the documentation. But this is one way to do it. Okay, so I hope that helps. I'm going to this a header, headers method request. It's a request object. We also has headers. Yeah, you check the documentation and try that one out. If I show you, hope that helps. Next we have how can I use the API in commercial? What does that mean? In a commercial project, well, you use it like this. There's nothing different you have to do. You just need to check the site. It allows commercial usage. Usually we say what the license is for the data, so that depends from API to API. You have to check the license and see if it's available for commercial use. Usually most APIs are, so that's a thing. If they aren't, it will say, so check that the license for the data, if you are allowed to use it or not. Then for the actual usage, you do this exact same thing. The actual process that we use inside a Rails app, for example, will be like this. You request it with your client, Faraday or whatever it is, and then you parse it, and then you have the data, and then you can do whatever you want with the data, be it a commercial project or a practice project or whatever it is. Thanks. Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. Any other questions before we end? Or comments, feedback, anything? If there's anything I can do to help you better or more, or anything I can do to improve, so I can provide better information for you, better wisdom, and help you improve faster, then let me know. Okay, I think we are done for today. Thanks for watching. Make sure if you enjoyed this to click the like button and subscribe to my channel. So the channel is my name, Jesus Castello, but the website is called rubyguides.com. So if you want to know when I'm going to be live, make sure to click the like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell. If you click the notification bell, it will tell you when I go live, when I go online on live stream, and will also tell you when I publish an actual recorded video, which I have one prepared for you, which I think a lot of people are going to like, so you don't want to miss that. So yeah, subscribe button, then the bell for activate notifications if you don't want to miss out on other content, helpful content for you. So thanks for watching. Take care of yourself. So that means exercise, eat healthy or healthier, and take care of other people too if you can. Thanks a lot for watching. I will see you in another video.